What's up everyone? The big news came out for the PTR February release patch notes. This is going to be the big patches that they're coming out with. This says part 1 or patch 1, so theoretically that means they'll most likely have this PTR go through for the first half of February and then a secondary patch come out, my guess be the second half of February, but we'll have to see how that goes. Either way, this is a huge patch with a lot of bug fixes, some tuning and some balancing metrics, as well as some changes to OPR and other items, so a lot to digest here. You may be wondering what exactly is important, what's not important, and while a lot of this stuff is very important, especially the plethora of bug fixes they've already proposed that they're going to fix, there's some other items that definitely need to be highlighted that may be missed if you don't scan through the whole list. So with that in mind, we're going to walk through the top 5 most impactful changes that I see happening from these patch notes that were given so far. If you have a different opinion or think I missed things or value things too high compared to others, you're welcome to say so in the comment below, as I think this is overall a solid top 5 list on what is to be expected, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Coming at number 5, this is the shortest of the 5 lists, but is the crafting XP buffs. So leveling for Arcana, Armoring, Engineering, Furnishing, Jewel Crafting, and Weaponsmithing trade skills will now require 10% less XP. Now, 10% less XP is theoretically, from the reading, across the whole board. So this isn't just like the final level or anything. This means as an entirety, it'll be 10% less XP required, which may not sound that impactful, but we're talking about thousands of XP, potentially hundreds if not thousands of shields or armors or void gauntlets or trophies or jewel fusions that you have to go through to be able to get these trade skills to 200, which is going to be really nice for those who have not been able to get all the 200 yet. Obviously there are people who have maxed out on that, and that would be a shame. That's going to be a bit easier now, especially when it used to be easier, then they made it a bit harder. But this is a nice step in the right direction. It will definitely bring life to more people because it will make it a little bit smaller of a mountain to climb up in terms of getting these other trade skills buffed. Number 4 are the Great Axe and Fire Staff changes. As a whole, I was going to make number 4 about kind of the weapon balancing things, but I felt like that was going to be too broad to talk about all of them, so I want to highlight the biggest ones coming, which is going to be for the Great Axe and the Fire Staff. For the Great Axe, there's some passive changes and some perk changes, but the big things to take away is Gravity Well. They updated the damage area to max like vortex visuals, and they reduced the pull force to allow players a chance to escape. So that means if you get hit by a Grav Well, you have a much easier chance of getting out compared to now, where it's really hard, especially if you hit right in the middle. Also, the pulling force ends just before the vortex damage occurs to allow players a chance to escape by dodging, and they remove the unintended damage from the initial pull and area effect of the vortex. So this is really a unique balancing position. As someone who runs Great Axe, obviously I'm not the most excited that it's going to be easier, but let's be honest, for the health of PvP and the health of this kind of fighting as a whole, this is something that needed to happen eventually, especially in wars. It's too common to just see a bunch of gravity wells like suction around a point and no one has any escape. There's no real counterplay. If you're trying to chase someone, you're out of stamina, you're just out of luck. So this actually, it gives a bit more playability and kind of a way to counter against this ability. So I think it's a really good change overall. It'll be good for the healthiness of PvP. So I shouldn't be able to complain too much. And of course, there's some other changes as well to Maelstrom and during Strike, some tooltip stuff. For Fire Staff, the biggest thing is going to be the Fireball. They increased Fireball projectile radius from 0.01 to 0.33 to make it easier to hit, which is obviously a fairly large increase from 0.01 to 0.33. That's crazy increase, and it can now critical hit. So this is gonna be really solid. Fire Staff as a whole, you're seeing less and less kind of like usability in wars. Most mages now just run Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet for understandable Scream and the Ice Spike and the Ice Storms and Oblivion. They're just too strong. And the Fire Staff, it kind of fell behind. It didn't have the utility the Ice Gauntlet, Void Gauntlet kind of provided, and the idea that's just full DPS staff just kind of took away the use in like wars. So allowing like the Fireball to do more damage and have easier hits gonna be nice. And they kind of buffed up and some fixed some issues with reheat, as well as Pillar of Fire. They reduced the delay between its activation and its spotting, so it's a bit faster now, so it's harder for people to dodge through. And they increased Flamethrowers like base movement speed, so it's more noticeable. So these are nice overall buffs for Fire Staff that, especially with how popular Ice Gauntlet and Void Gauntlet mages are nowadays, it's gonna be nice to kind of bring back this weapon into the meta. At number 3, this is one that you may not have really noticed from reading the patch notes. I certainly didn't read it at first, and I didn't really think much about it, but it's actually a pretty big change that should be noted, especially in terms of mutations and with dungeons as a whole. If you didn't know already, I'm talking about the Chardis changes, and for those who don't know who Chardis is, he's the final boss of Lazarus, and for the longest time, he's just been considered a joke. He's an easy boss. People sleep through him and play through games. Even the mutations, M10 guys are like sleeping through it, not really paying attention because he doesn't do anything. You all stack right in front of him. Maybe your healer stacks in that back corner so he doesn't get hit by anything, and you just sit there and left click for the whole time. And while not the full idea of the boss itself has been fixed to actually be interactive, they have done some things to actually make this something you have to pay attention through. For instance, they increased the stun phase by 5 seconds. They increased the time before the final laser from 75 seconds to 90 seconds, so it's going to give you a bit more time. And the reason why they did it is because of this. They reduced the downtime between phase 1 and phase 2 lasers by half, by 30 seconds, and they increased the base damages of those lasers. So you're going to have those really hard-hitting damages from those lasers initially. The damage on Chardis as a whole is 25%, so increase across the board. And they increase his laser damage by 15% for those phases. The reason why this is important is because the final laser damage now deals 15% of health as damage per second. Now obviously, when you get to the final laser, he kind of like, leans over and just targets one person. It's just a heal check, and it's pretty easy to do it. It did very, very small damage, but this is a huge change that they increase the time to phase 3, and you really are going to have to force your way to find ways to make sure that you can survive through the new buff damages, longer stuns, and stronger lasers, and make sure you balance how to get him to fall down for the increased damage phases, because otherwise this final laser is going to hurt, and it's going to be a really strong heal check for your healer. So a really interesting change that has been much needed. Lazarus is kind of a bit of a joke dungeon. The first boss has been always like the harder boss compared to the final one, so it's nice to see that they're trying to make the difficulty up and actually give PvE a challenge. Second, the most important change coming out with the PTR for February is actually the OPR changes. Now, PvPers rejoice. We've been asking for the longest time for a way to progress in this game that's not PvE. When mutations came out, while they were mostly received well across the community, people were really upset that they had to go and grind mutations and PvE content when all they wanted to do was PvP, and OPR queues were dying because people were just spamming orbs and doing that instead of playing Outpost Rush, and it really hurt the healthiness of PvP on the game. I know my server personally, we went from about 7 to 9 wars in a week, and when mutations came out we had 1 because people were grinding mutations and didn't bother about doing wars. And PvPers, I know a lot personally, decided to take a break from the game because they just didn't want it to go and grind 20 hours of PvE content to keep playing PvP. But with the OPR changes, they're trying to find alternate ways so PvPers can just PvP and continue to progress. So first, they reworked the scoring, so dealing damage now increases player scores and reducing the amount of points that players get from killing players and the AI. So it's more about damage and making sure you're fighting and less about just farming or getting the final kills when people are down. Additionally, they reduced the damage dealt by the Corrupted Brute by 10% and its health by 13%, which is a much needed nerf for the Brute because, I mean, honestly, everyone hates the Brute. It really should just be removed from OPR, but at the very least, they're reducing the damage and the health, so it's a bit less of a menace. And right before, it's been increased in terms of price to be able to get it, so they're pulling back its strength and utility a little bit, which is nice because it is just really hard to be able to destroy it. But also an interesting thing that they did is they also are going to give siege equipment a bit more utility in OPR because brutes now take 200% bonus damage from siege. So it gives you a bit more reason to try and maybe build siege equipment on those outside spots around the forts to be able to actually beat the brutes. But the bigger thing about OPR that they're doing beyond just these balance changes and how things work is they're also increasing the rewards and adjusting them to actually make you be able to progress. So they now receive umbral shards on completion of a match, 100 if you win and 50 if you lose, which is really nice. You get faction tokens now. The caches now reward 2 pieces of Outpost Rush specific armor and specific weapon. And there's a 50% chance for a 4th item in Outpost Rush jewelry piece. And these items, they have a 2.5% chance to roll an Outpost Rush item as a named item that exists today. So you could get a, your Lazarus bow or something from OPR now as well as there's a significantly increased likelihood that the rewards in OPR will increase the player's expertise. So you no longer have to go and grind elite zones as much or grind dungeons as much. You could just purely play OPR and increase your expertise, which then in turns you also get the Umbral Shards and the faction things and the chance at PvP specific gear from OPR. So as a whole, really just bringing a lot of healthiness that the game mode needed, with better rewards, a way to progress as a PvP player, and also some fine-tuning in how scores works in the Brute. So a much needed and very encouraging change from Amazon Games for the OPR game mode. And lastly, in my opinion, the most important changes coming out beyond all the bugs and all the other balancing is the weapon swapping and dodging changes that are coming out for combat. This is really big and honestly super exciting. So I'm just going to run through everything that's coming out because this is going to really change how fighting works in this game. So you can now swap weapons during hit reactions, dodges, traversal, and while also consuming, except weapon cutting. So this doesn't interrupt these actions. You can just swap them and not have to worrying about those buffers in terms of that. Additionally, weapon swap buffers no longer can be cancelled if you're staggered before the weapon swapping can start. So if you start swapping and you get staggered, you won't cancel your swap, and that changes that issues people are having in terms of stagger. And then they can also, swaps and attacks can be queued simultaneously. So if you press swap during an attack's recovery, then immediately press an ability key, the weapon will swap at the first swap cancel frame, then immediately perform the desired ability. So if you have your Great Axe out and you want to perform Shockwave on your Warhammer, if you swap and then press, it will make sure that happens. Before, it would sometimes the swap wouldn't go fully through and it would make you use your other ability on that slot from your Great Axe, and that would cause some frustration. So that's going to really seamlessly kind of make it easier to be able to manage which weapon is out, even if it doesn't actually show visibly it is swapped, because you know consistently now it will happen. And then on the dodging and blocking side, they've shortened the recovery time for all dodges, so transitioning to movement after dodge should feel more fluid for all players now. So basic attacks like startups can now be dodge and block cancelled up to 2 frames before the first active frame. For melee attacks, the first active frame is the first frame the weapon can damage, and for ranged attacks, this is the first frame that the projectile spawns. So it gives block and animation canceling a bit more activity in this game. You can also really fine-tune your skills with how to dodge and attack at the same time, and work those kind of like small little frame adjustments to have a more fluid gameplay, and also have a bit more counterability and more skill will be shown in PvP. And then lastly on this, when performing light attacks with a melee weapon, block and dodge inputs will take priority over the next light attack in the chain. This change is aimed at preventing accidental attack cues that leave players vulnerable when they intended to defend. This is really big, especially for duels, but also just in general, like fighting people in wars. Having the capability of not just having your next attack screw you over and not be able to dodge and stuff is really nice. And be able to make sure you can see, because you can dodge through a lot of CC in this ability, so having that ability to actually cancel that and just dodge is going to be really healthy for actually having like counter ability against a lot of the hard CC in this game. So that's my top 5 list for the top 5 biggest changes coming out in the PTR February release notes patch 1. Again, this is patch 1, so ideally there's a second patch coming out. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if I missed any changes or things that you think should be in, or maybe things I rated too highly. Overall, I personally was feeling a little burnt out on New World, so when these changes got announced, it really kind of invigorated my excitement for the game, and hopefully they continue with these patches and with this direction and continue to just work on creating a better game as it stands now before adding more content. So really excited about this. Amazon, if you're able to actually deliver on these promises, I think the game's going to be in a much better spot. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.